In every school, there's always that one teacher who carries an aura of authority, someone who believes they hold the key to all knowledge, someone who assumes their intellectual dominance over their students. Professor Mark Harrison was exactly that type of teacher. With a reputation as one of the most brilliant minds in academia, Harrison had spent his entire career building a fortress of pride and arrogance around his intellect. He didn't just teach, he commanded respect. His classroom was more than just a place for learning, it was his kingdom, and he was its untouchable ruler. To him, every student who entered was merely a servant to his knowledge, a pawn in his game of proving superiority. Harrison believed that his way was the only way, and anything less was unacceptable. The idea that a student could challenge him, especially one from a privileged background, was not only preposterous but blasphemous in his eyes. When Barron Trump, a new student, walked into his classroom, Harrison immediately dismissed him. He assumed that Barron, like many others with wealth and a famous last name, would be nothing more than a spoiled rich kid who believed his name alone could buy success. He saw Barron as an easy target for his usual brand of intellectual bullying. In his mind, the young Trump would soon crumble under the weight of Harrison's genius. However, what Harrison didn't anticipate was that Barron wasn't the typical student. Barron had a quiet confidence, a brilliant mind, and a silent strength that Harrison had never encountered before. As Barron sat down, Harrison's mind began to work. He wasn't just going to teach this kid, he was going to crush him, to prove once and for all that no one could ever outshine Professor Harrison. But as he would soon discover, this wasn't going to be as easy as he thought. Barron Trump wasn't your typical student. At first glance, he seemed like just another face in the crowd, quiet, reserved, and perhaps a little aloof. But if you took the time to look a little deeper, you'd see something entirely different. Barron wasn't interested in the attention that others often sought. He didn't wear flashy designer clothes to make a statement. He wasn't out to impress anyone with expensive accessories or a bragging attitude. In fact, you would rarely even hear him speak unless he had something meaningful to say. Instead of trying to stand out, Barron preferred to blend in, observe, and quietly navigate the world around him. This wasn't out of shyness or insecurity, rather, it was the mark of someone who understood the power of silence. Barron was intelligent, no, not just intelligent, but brilliant. His mind was like a sponge, absorbing information from books, from conversations, from the behavior of the people around him. He didn't rush to respond, he took the time to process, to think critically, and to see patterns where others saw only chaos. At Winslow Academy, where Barron had just enrolled, the competition was fierce. It wasn't just any ordinary school, it was a battleground where the children of politicians, business tycoons, and influential families came to learn. The pressure to succeed wasn't just academic, it was a matter of status. Barron had always been taught to rise above these superficial expectations, to be true to himself, but now he found himself in an environment that would test him like never before. Despite the prestige of Winslow, the elite students, and the cutthroat environment, Barron wasn't fazed. He was used to the whispers, the judgment, and the expectations that came with his last name. To the world, he was just another rich kid with a famous family, someone who could easily coast through life on his father's coattails. But Barron didn't believe in taking shortcuts. He had no interest in the comfort of his last name, he wanted to prove himself, to show that his worth didn't come from inherited privilege, but from his own merit. And so, when he walked into Professor Harrison's classroom on that fateful day, he did so with quiet confidence, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. But that confidence wasn't just about Barron's intellect, it was about his inner strength. The world often tried to define him by his family, to put him in a box based on assumptions and prejudices. But Barron was more than that. He was more than just a surname or a set of expectations. His strength came from the knowledge that, in the end, it was his abilities that would define him, not the weight of the name he carried. Barron wasn't interested in proving anyone wrong or showing off, he simply wanted to be seen for who he truly was, a young man with a sharp mind, an inquisitive nature, and an unwavering sense of self. As the students of Winslow Academy watched Barron sit quietly at his desk, many of them couldn't help but whisper. They'd heard the rumors about the new student, Barron Trump, the son of the billionaire businessman. They expected him to be like the others, someone who thought his wealth could buy him success. But Barron wasn't the stereotypical rich kid. He didn't flaunt his wealth, he didn't boast about his achievements, and most importantly, he wasn't there to play the game. He was there to prove that his intellect, not his name, was what truly mattered. And in that moment, as he sat still, the students who whispered began to realize that this was no ordinary student. Barron was someone different, someone they would soon come to respect in ways they never expected. Professor Mark Harrison had seen many students walk into his classroom, but none like Barron Trump. When Barron stepped in, Harrison's eyes immediately narrowed, scanning the young man with the cool, calculating gaze of someone who believed they already knew everything they needed to know. Barron Trump, the son of a billionaire businessman? To Harrison, that name was nothing more than a ticket to success for someone who hadn't earned it. He had a reputation for being tough, ruthless even, and he prided himself on making sure that no student, no matter how rich or famous, could ever overshadow him in his domain. For Harrison, success was about power. It was about proving that no one, not even a student with a famous last name, could match his brilliance. He had been the master of his classroom for years, and he wasn't about to let a new student upend that balance. From the moment Barron entered his class, Harrison knew he would have to make an example of him. He would crush the young Trump spirit, show him that no amount of wealth or privilege could buy you respect in his classroom. Barron wouldn't be the first privileged student Harrison had tried to humble, but Harrison was determined this time would be different. He wasn't just going to teach Barron a lesson, he was going to prove a point to everyone in the class that no one, no matter their background, could escape the wrath of Professor Harrison. The lesson began with Harrison's usual bravado, and as he spoke, he made sure to establish his dominance. But when he turned to the board and wrote an incredibly complex equation, he knew it would be the moment of truth. Barron Trump had the audacity to think he could simply walk into this class, into this world of academic rigor, and breeze through it unchallenged. Harrison smirked as he turned back to the class, ready to watch Barron falter under the weight of the problem. But Barron didn't falter. He didn't panic. He didn't even seem to flinch. Instead, he calmly stood up, walked to the board, and began solving the equation. Harrison's smirk faltered slightly. Barron wasn't like the other students who had approached the board with confidence, only to freeze under pressure. This was different. Barron wasn't just solving the equation, he was dismantling it with a method that was faster, more efficient, and more intuitive than anything Harrison had ever expected. Within minutes, Barron stepped back, his solution staring at Harrison with undeniable clarity. The room went silent. The students, many of whom had already written off Barron as another privileged kid, sat in stunned silence, unable to comprehend what they had just witnessed. Harrison, usually a man of unshakable confidence, found himself momentarily rattled. The solution was flawless, perfect, even, but it wasn't just that. Barron had done it in a way that challenged everything Harrison thought he knew about mathematics. Barron had cut through the complexity, bypassing the traditional method, and yet his answer was still absolutely correct. Harrison recovered quickly, but his pride was bruised. He couldn't afford to let this stand. He needed to regain control. He smirked again, though it was more strained this time, and challenged Barron further. "Impressive," Harrison said, his voice tinged with condescension, "but math isn't just about numbers. It's about pressure, focus, and mental endurance. One equation doesn't prove everything." He wasn't going to let one small victory undo the years of control he had over his students. If Barron truly had the ability to back up his solution, then Harrison would make sure he would prove it. And so the games began. Harrison set challenge after challenge, each one more complex than the last. But Barron stood tall. He never wavered. Each time Harrison thought he could break Barron's composure, Barron met the challenge with quiet strength. The equation that had once seemed so impossible now felt like a trivial obstacle. Barron didn't just solve the problems, he outthought Harrison. He turned every challenge into a learning moment, not just for himself, but for the entire class. And in doing so, Barron didn't just pass Harrison's tests, he began to dismantle the very foundation of Harrison's arrogance. By the end of the lesson, it was clear, Barron wasn't just another rich kid. He wasn't just someone who had inherited his name. Barron Trump had proven himself as a brilliant, capable, and unshakable force. And in doing so, he had shown Harrison that true intelligence, true strength, isn't about the pressure others place on you. It's about how you respond when the world tries to bring you down. The tension in Professor Harrison's classroom was palpable. As Barron Trump stood there, cool and collected, not a hint of doubt or fear on his face, Harrison's mind was racing. This wasn't supposed to happen. He had been the king of his classroom for so long, no student, no matter how privileged, had ever dared to challenge his authority. And yet, here was Barron Trump, standing confidently in front of him, solving complex equations with a quiet ease that left Harrison feeling both threatened and helpless. The usual power dynamic in the room had been completely upended. Harrison had to regain control. He couldn't let this kid, this rich, privileged kid, take away his dignity. Not in front of the entire class. Harrison decided to push Barron further. One equation, one answer, wasn't enough. This had to be more. It was no longer just about mathematics, it was about domination. About proving that no one could outsmart him. He set the next challenge, a logic puzzle, one that he believed would finally break Barron's composure. He was sure that no one, not even Barron, could solve this without cracking under the pressure. With a sharp, deliberate motion, he handed the puzzle to Barron, eyes locked in a silent challenge. Barron, however, didn't flinch. He didn't even hesitate. He simply glanced at the puzzle, took a deep breath, and stepped forward. There was no rush in his movements, only a calm, measured approach that sent an unsettling wave through the room. Every student was watching now, their breath held in anticipation. Harrison had thrown down the gauntlet, and Barron was about to pick it up. As Barron began to work through the puzzle, there was a shift in the classroom. The whispers that had once filled the room had disappeared. The students watched in stunned silence as Barron solved the puzzle with an effortless fluidity that seemed almost surreal. His movements were precise, deliberate. In less than a minute, he had completed the puzzle. Harrison stood frozen for a moment, his mind racing. He hadn't expected this. He had never met a student like Barron, a student who seemed immune to the pressure Harrison had always relied on to break those who challenged him. Barron had not only solved the puzzle, but he had done so in a way that made Harrison question his own methods. The solution was not only correct, it was elegant. It was faster, more intuitive, and more efficient than anything Harrison could have conceived. For a brief moment, the reality of the situation hit Harrison, he was losing. But Harrison wasn't the kind of man to admit defeat. He clenched his jaw and forced a smile. "Impressive," he said, though his words barely concealed the simmering frustration beneath the surface. "But one puzzle doesn't prove anything. We're just getting started." He glanced at the class, his eyes darting across their faces as if to remind them that he was still in charge. He needed to remind himself too. But deep down, Harrison knew that something fundamental had shifted. Barron had done the unthinkable. He had stepped into Harrison's world, a place where Harrison was supposed to reign supreme, and turned the tables. The next challenge was even more complex, a series of equations that required not just intelligence, but strategic thinking. It was exactly the kind of challenge Harrison thought would break Barron. But again, Barron didn't hesitate. He didn't even seem rattled by the growing tension in the room. He approached the challenge with the same quiet confidence, solving each problem with ease and accuracy. Each time Harrison thought he could outsmart Barron, the young man stood firm. He wasn't showing off. He wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone. He was simply solving problems the way he knew how, efficiently, effectively, and without breaking a sweat. The class, once filled with skepticism and doubt, was beginning to change their opinion. They could no longer dismiss Barron as just another privileged kid. He had done the unthinkable. He had stood up to Harrison's relentless tests, and not only survived, he had thrived. Harrison had expected to crush Barron's spirit, to make an example out of him. But instead, Barron had turned the tables, forcing Harrison to confront his own arrogance. As the challenges went on, it became clear to everyone in that classroom, this wasn't just a battle of intellect. This was a battle for control, a battle of wills. Harrison had tried to use every psychological trick in his arsenal to break Barron, but Barron remained unshaken. In that moment, Barron proved that true strength wasn't about showing off or throwing your weight around. It was about staying calm, staying composed, and staying true to who you are, no matter how hard the world tries to break you. And as the final bell rang and the students filed out of the room, they carried with them a new respect for Barron Trump, one that would change the way they viewed not only him, but themselves. Professor Harrison's next move was to take this battle to a more personal level. The challenge he had been giving Barron Trump wasn't just about math anymore. It was about something much deeper, something that went beyond equations, logic, or even intelligence. Harrison, a man who had spent years crafting his reputation as an intellectual giant, was now facing a student who had completely disregarded the hierarchy Harrison had so carefully constructed. And that, above all, was the real threat. The deep, almost primal threat to Harrison's ego was not that Barron was better at math, it was that Barron had dared to challenge his authority, something that no student had ever done before. As Barron sat there, unshaken by every mental obstacle Harrison threw at him, Harrison felt the pressure mounting. His attempts to prove Barron was simply a privileged child had failed. Barron had not only proven himself smarter than Harrison had expected, but he had done it with a poise and confidence that left Harrison scrambling for a way to regain control. But no matter how hard Harrison tried to break Barron, he simply couldn't. Barron wasn't just passing the tests, he was redefining the very notion of what it meant to be a student at Winslow Academy. The pivotal moment came when Harrison, unable to win through intellectual challenges alone, decided to play his final card, a direct attack on Barron's identity. He couldn't defeat Barron intellectually, so he decided to challenge the very foundation of Barron's existence. "You know, Barron," Harrison said, his voice now cold and calculating, "I've been wondering something. I can't help but ask myself, if you didn't have that last name, if you weren't born into wealth and power, would you even be here?" He leaned forward, his eyes locking with Barron's, hoping for some sign of vulnerability. Harrison was certain this would be the moment he would break Barron. Everyone knew the weight of a name, especially one as famous as Trump's. To Harrison, this question wasn't just a dig, it was a clever trap. A way to force Barron to confront his privilege, to make him doubt himself. But Barron didn't flinch. He didn't even hesitate. His gaze remained steady, unwavering, and after a long pause, a small, knowing smile appeared on his lips. The room held its breath, waiting for Barron's response. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for, the moment when Barron would either crumble or prove himself once and for all. Barron's voice broke the silence, calm and clear, "Professor, if my name were all I had, why would you keep testing me? You've been putting me through challenge after challenge, trying to break me. If I were just some rich kid with no ability, wouldn't you have simply ignored me?" His words were simple, but they carried an undeniable weight. They were a quiet rebuke, not just to Harrison's question, but to his entire approach. Barron had turned Harrison's own attack back on him, flipping the entire conversation on its head. The students around them, who had been silent up until this point, started to shift in their seats. The air in the classroom was thick with realization. Harrison had tried to make Barron question his worth, but instead, Barron had made Harrison question his own assumptions. And it was clear to everyone that Barron wasn't just surviving the challenges, he was winning, not because of his wealth, but because of his ability to remain unshaken. Barron wasn't just proving his intelligence. He was proving his strength, his self-awareness, and his resilience in the face of authority. Harrison stood there for a moment, visibly stunned. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't anticipated that the student he had dismissed so quickly, Barron Trump, the rich kid from a famous family, would outwit him so completely. Harrison had spent his career teaching students who were afraid of him, students who bowed to his intellectual superiority. But Barron wasn't like the others. Barron didn't care about reputation. He didn't care about wealth. He cared about his mind, his abilities, and his own quiet strength. For a brief moment, Harrison felt a sense of unease creeping over him. He had lost control. The students in the room could feel it too. This wasn't just an academic showdown anymore, it was a battle for power, and Harrison had been dethroned. But Harrison wasn't the type of person to admit defeat easily. Instead, he tried to recover, his voice tight with forced composure. "You're right," he said, though the words felt hollow. "I've been testing you. But that's not the end of this. We're just getting started." He couldn't let go of the challenge. He couldn't admit that Barron had already won. So, he pushed forward, setting up yet another series of tests, all designed to prove that Barron wasn't as untouchable as he appeared. But Barron had already shown what mattered. It wasn't about the tests or the challenges. It was about how you responded when the world tried to tear you down. And Barron had responded not with arrogance, not with anger, but with an unwavering certainty in his own abilities. He had shown that the true power came not from external validation, but from an unshakable belief in oneself. As the lesson came to a close, the students filed out of the classroom, but they didn't just walk away with a new understanding of mathematics. They walked away with a new respect for Barron Trump, not because of his last name, but because of how he had handled the most difficult test of all, the test of character. And Professor Harrison, once so sure of his own superiority, would never be the same again. Because in that moment, Barron had proven that true greatness isn't about dominating others. It's about standing your ground, no matter what challenges come your way, and showing the world that your worth isn't determined by your name, it's defined by who you are. As the final bell rang and students filed out of the classroom, the atmosphere inside Professor Harrison's lecture hall felt eerily still. The challenge had been set. The stakes had been raised. And the outcome had shifted in a way no one, especially Harrison, had anticipated. Barron Trump had walked into that room that day as just another new student, one who, by all appearances, had little more than his family name to rely on. But by the time the bell rang, Barron had done more than simply prove himself. He had transformed the entire dynamic of the classroom, and with it, the way everyone in that room, students and teacher alike, viewed themselves and each other. Professor Harrison, once the undisputed intellectual giant, stood there, trying to regain his composure. His ego, which had been his fortress for years, had been shattered. He had always prided himself on being the smartest person in the room, and he had constructed a persona built on that very premise. But Barron had exposed the cracks in that carefully constructed image. It wasn't about Barron being smarter, faster, or better at math. It was about something deeper. It was about Barron's unshakable confidence, his ability to remain completely calm under pressure, and his refusal to allow anyone to define his worth. It was the way Barron had handled every attack, every challenge, with an almost unnerving level of poise. And that, more than anything, had left Harrison reeling. For Harrison, this was a bitter pill to swallow. He had been humiliated, but worse than that, he had been forced to confront a fundamental truth he had spent years ignoring: intelligence is not the only measure of power. For Harrison, power had always been about control. Control over his students, control over the curriculum, and control over the perception of himself as the dominant intellectual force in the room. But Barron had shown him that power wasn't something you could wield through intimidation, or by setting elaborate traps to expose weaknesses in others. True power, Barron had demonstrated, comes from a quiet strength, the kind of strength that doesn't need to shout to be heard. It's the strength that comes from within, the kind that allows a person to stand tall, to remain steadfast, even when the world around them is crumbling. And as Barron stood there, unaffected by Harrison's challenges, he made it clear that it wasn't about proving anything to anyone. He wasn't trying to humiliate Harrison or show off. He wasn't trying to make a statement to the rest of the class. He simply wanted to be seen for who he was, not the son of a billionaire, not a privileged kid with a famous name, but as someone who had earned his place in that classroom through his intellect, his resilience, and his unshakable belief in himself. Barron's confidence didn't come from the wealth or status of his family, it came from the knowledge that he had the ability to face any challenge, no matter how daunting, with grace and composure. And in that moment, Barron had done more than just solve a series of equations or logic puzzles. He had stood up to Harrison's bullying tactics, to the pressure of his classmates, and to the weight of his family name, and in doing so, he had taken control of the room. As the students filtered out, many of them shared glances, exchanging looks that spoke volumes. For the first time, they saw Barron not as just a rich kid, not as someone who had coasted by on his name, but as someone who had earned their respect. Barron had redefined what it meant to be successful. It wasn't about who you knew or what you had, it was about how you carried yourself in the face of adversity. It was about how you stood firm when others tried to push you down. It was about the quiet strength that comes from knowing your worth, and refusing to let anyone, no matter how powerful, take that away from you. For the first time, the students of Winslow Academy had witnessed something they hadn't expected, a student who wasn't afraid to challenge the status quo. A student who wasn't intimidated by authority, who didn't need to rely on his family name or his wealth to prove his worth. And as they left the classroom that day, each of them carried with them a new understanding of what true strength looked like. It wasn't about domination, about proving you were the smartest, or the most powerful. It was about staying true to yourself, no matter how hard the world tried to push you down. And Barron Trump had shown them that lesson in a way they would never forget. For Professor Harrison, the days that followed were full of quiet reflection. He had always considered himself the epitome of academic achievement. His entire career had been built on the belief that no one could challenge his intellectual superiority. But in one day, one student, he had been forced to confront the limitations of that belief. Barron Trump had not just proven his intelligence. He had proven that intellectual dominance was not the be-all and end-all of success. And perhaps most importantly, he had shown Harrison that a truly great teacher isn't the one who always wins, but the one who knows when to learn from their own students. In the end, Barron had done more than just challenge Professor Harrison, he had taught him a lesson about humility, about the importance of recognizing the strength in others, and most importantly, about the value of believing in yourself, even when the world around you doesn't. Barron's journey wasn't just about academics. It was about something much more powerful, the ability to stand strong in the face of adversity, to refuse to be defined by anything or anyone but your own abilities. And that, ultimately, was the lesson that would stay with everyone who had witnessed it, long after the class had ended. In the days following the extraordinary showdown between Barron Trump and Professor Harrison, the reverberations of that fateful class spread like wildfire throughout Winslow Academy. The once unshakable aura of authority that had surrounded Harrison's name began to unravel. He had been the embodiment of control, the intellectual king of his classroom, and the undisputed master of his subjects. But now, everything had changed. The school, once dominated by Harrison's reputation, began to buzz with a new energy. For the first time, students who had once cowered in the face of Harrison's condescending remarks and harsh tests now found themselves questioning what they had been told to believe. They weren't just students in a school anymore, they were witnesses to a moment that would challenge the way they saw their own potential and power. Barron Trump had not just passed a series of mathematical challenges, he had challenged the very idea of what it meant to be powerful in the classroom. Barron's quiet composure, his ability to remain unfazed in the face of relentless pressure, was a revelation. Students who had previously dismissed him as nothing more than a rich kid with a famous name now saw him in an entirely new light. Barron wasn't just the son of a billionaire, he was a force to be reckoned with, a young man whose intellect and resolve could not be measured by his last name or the wealth he inherited. He had shown them all that success wasn't about the privileges you were born with, but about the strength you carried within yourself. He had proven that intelligence wasn't something you could simply flaunt, it was something you had to demonstrate, something you had to wield with humility, precision, and grace. Barron's success wasn't defined by his family's name, it was defined by the quiet confidence that emanated from his every move. And that was a lesson that every student in that classroom took to heart. In the hallways, whispers of Barron's victory spread. At first, many students were skeptical, unsure whether to believe the rumors about how he had outperformed Professor Harrison at every turn. But soon enough, the truth became undeniable. Barron Trump had done what no one else had ever dared to do, he had stood up to one of the most respected and feared professors at Winslow Academy, and he had done it with a level of poise and intelligence that left Harrison reeling. The students couldn't help but look at him differently. They no longer saw Barron as just another privileged kid, they saw him as someone who had faced down a giant and emerged victorious. For Barron, however, the victory was not something he sought for validation. He had never intended to prove anything to anyone. From the very start, his goal had always been clear, to show the world, and most importantly, himself, that his worth wasn't tied to his last name or his family's wealth. His strength, his intelligence, his resolve, these were the things that defined him, and nothing could take that away from him. The challenges Harrison had set for him had never been about outsmarting the professor. They had been about proving to himself that he could face any obstacle and rise above it, no matter how difficult or personal the attack. Barron had known from the moment he walked into the classroom that this wasn't just a test of math or logic, it was a test of character. And he had passed with flying colors. But Barron's victory wasn't just about intellectual prowess or the ability to solve complex equations. It was about something much deeper, something that had little to do with math and everything to do with the way he carried himself. Barron's true strength came from within. It came from the confidence he had in his own abilities, the resilience he had built over the years, and the quiet assurance that he didn't need to prove anything to anyone. In a world where people often sought validation from others, Barron had learned that true power came from knowing who you were, regardless of what others thought or said about you. He had proven that the most important thing wasn't the accolades or the recognition, but the inner conviction that you were enough, just as you were. This lesson, though it was learned through Barron's challenge to Professor Harrison, wasn't just for Barron. It was for everyone in that room, and beyond it. The students at Winslow Academy, once so quick to judge others based on their wealth or their family name, now saw the world through a different lens. They began to realize that their value didn't lie in the labels they had been given or the status they were born into. It wasn't about the schools they attended, the names they carried, or the people they knew, it was about how they handled themselves, how they faced adversity, and how they built their own success. Barron Trump had taught them that true worth came from within, and no one, not even the most powerful professor, could take that away from you. And for Professor Harrison, the aftermath was nothing short of transformative. For the first time in his career, he was forced to acknowledge something he had long denied, his own limitations. Harrison had spent years thinking that intelligence was about dominance, about maintaining control over his students and the material he taught. But Barron had shown him that intelligence, like power, wasn't something you could dominate, it was something you could inspire. The students who once feared him now looked at him differently. And Harrison, in his own quiet way, was beginning to realize that the respect he had worked so hard to earn had to be earned through humility and understanding, not through intimidation and control. In the weeks that followed, Harrison began to change. He started listening more to his students, respecting their ideas, and recognizing their strengths. He stopped seeing them as mere pupils to be molded in his image and began seeing them as individuals, each with their own unique perspectives and talents. It wasn't an easy shift for Harrison, who had spent years at the top of his academic ladder, but it was a necessary one. And in that process, he learned the most important lesson of all, that a true teacher isn't someone who demands respect, it's someone who earns it by respecting their students, by acknowledging their strengths, and by being willing to learn from them. Barron Trump's story at Winslow Academy wasn't just about mathematics or intelligence, it was about something far more profound: the power of self-belief, the importance of standing tall in the face of adversity, and the undeniable truth that no one, no matter how powerful or prestigious, gets to define your worth. That power belongs to you, and Barron Trump had shown everyone in that room exactly how to claim it. The story of Barron Trump and Professor Harrison offers a powerful lesson that resonates far beyond the classroom. In the real world, people are often quick to judge others based on their background, wealth, or family name. But Barron's quiet strength and unshakable confidence show us that true worth is not determined by external factors, it's about who you are inside and how you carry yourself in the face of adversity. Life constantly throws challenges our way, whether it's at work, in relationships, or in personal goals, and we're often faced with people who might try to define us based on their own assumptions. Barron teaches us that our value isn't for anyone else to dictate, it's up to us to prove our worth through our actions, our resilience, and our integrity. When we face criticism or opposition, we don't need to fight back with arrogance or anger. Like Barron, we can meet challenges with calm determination, knowing that our true power comes from within. The real lesson here is simple: stay true to yourself, trust in your abilities, and never let anyone, no matter how powerful, make you question your worth.